hopefully we provide you some insight today into understanding the value of your business. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about me, and then I'll let Kyle tell you a little bit about himself. So we work for SBA Certified Public Accountants. We're both in a group within our firm called the Business Advisory Services Group. That group is a more consultative group, and in our group we handle a lot of transactions. We do a lot of M&A work, we do a lot of project-based work. Kyle does a lot of valuations. He's a certified valuation person. So we do a lot of different projects in our group, very consultative. So we have a lot of different experience with a lot of different things, but today what we're going to focus on is understanding methods of calculating the value of your company. Kyle's going to go into a little bit of that on what they look at when they look at valuations. So I think it's important to understand, and you're going to see this throughout our presentation, that a valuation is not just about the financial numbers. And so some of the things that I'm going to go through at the end, after Kyle goes through the calculation, I'm going to go through different things that people look at that's going to increase the value. And those tend to be a little bit more non-financial and give you ideas on how you can increase that. So then we're going to, as I said, throughout the entire presentation, we're going to talk about why a valuation is not just financial. It's not just metric driven. So one of the things that we talk a lot about exit planning is there's 3 things you need to know. You need to know, and I have sell your business on here, but it could really be exit your business. The 3 objectives are when you want to exit it, for the money you want to exit it, and to the person you want to exit it. Each one of these, there's multiple scenarios. We're not going to go in too deep onto the person. We're not going to go into when. We're going to focus a little bit more on the financial piece of it today, the value.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. So yeah, the first step I would say, growing the value of your business is getting a base point of what is your business worth. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways that, so I'm going to kind of highlight more of the valuation side of things. So the first thing I wanted to kind of touch on is the rule of thumb. That's just numbers. There's not a lot of analysis. So you might hear people saying, oh, my company's worth 5 times EBITDA, 1.5 times revenue. Those are some things that you might hear with talking to people. Those are good, again, rule of thumbs, good kind of base points, but it doesn't really dive into the kind of nitty-gritty of your business. Each business is different. It has its own type of things that makes it special. So those numbers are more of like a range. And it also depends on a couple other things of who's the buyer and things like that, which we can go into later. And then the next 2 things that I wanted to highlight are calculation of value and a conclusion of value. Yeah, so we were talking about how to grow your business, kind of some of the things that we look into. So first step is doing a valuation. It's a great exercise in getting an idea of what is your business worth. A lot of people might not entirely know. There are different purposes for why you might want to know the value of your business. Are you looking to sell? Are you looking to gift it?
And one of the things I just want to interject here, has anybody gone through anything called due diligence in the past, or is anybody familiar with what due diligence is? Okay, having a valuation can help prep you too for that due diligence. Even though a buyer may come in and they may do their own valuation, it's good to kind of know what's going on before you get to that point.
Yeah, that's a great point. And again, so the two different valuation techniques that we use is a calculation of value and a conclusion of value. I like to kind of use analogies. So the one I like to think of is like going to a wedding. Calculation of value is just going to a typical wedding, maybe a barn house wedding. We go through all the valuation processes, which I'll talk about later. But the conclusion of value is more of like the black tie event. It's more of the buttoned up. There's certain, it's if you need like more of a higher level, maybe it's for estate purposes. But yeah, so essentially the calculation of value is definitely the good start. Is where we like to, a client comes to us and says, what's my company worth? We usually like to start with a calculation of value. And then depending on the purpose, we might make it into a conclusion of value. So there are 3 different approaches into evaluation. So they're the net asset approach, the income approach, and the market approach. So I'll kind of talk a little bit surface level about each of those. So net asset approach, also known as a cost approach, that's pretty much looking at like your balance sheet. So we like to think of this for operating companies more as like the floor. So the machinery you have on your balance sheet, things like that aspect. I would say for more capital intensive businesses, the net asset approach is typically what we use or look at more to base our value off of. And that's more of like the real estate. The income approach looks more at your income statement. So what are you cash flowing? What's your bottom line looking at? We look at the EBITDA, those type of things. Total sales, kind of looking at the trends of that. And then a market approach, looking at the comparables to, like businesses. We have a software that we use that has different business transactions. We like to kind of look at your financials, your business, and kind of compare those to other sales that might have happened. The thing with this is a lot of the local businesses, we can try to compare to, like we're not going to compare to like the S&P or like the bigger companies. Those are good, but a lot of times like the locally held, there might not always be comparables out there to like your typical business. Go ahead.
Before you go into the market approach, I just want to explain, in case anybody in the room doesn't know what EBITDA is and a multiple of EBITDA. So EBITDA is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. So that is an approach you'll see used quite a bit. So they're going to start with your income statement, and Kyle's maybe going to go through this a little bit more, but then there's some normalizing items where they normalize, and then they take that number and they add back. So then you come up with an EBITDA number, and then they look at multiples in the industry. And that, to Kyle's point, those could sway a little bit, but as I talk about later, I'm going to talk about how to increase that multiple. Obviously, the higher EBITDA number you get, it's going to create a bigger value. But I think what people don't understand is if you can't increase the financial number, the EBITDA, how am I going to get a higher multiple? And those are the kind of things that I'm going to talk about. But that's what EBITDA is, in case anybody didn't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And so at the end of the valuation, we walk through each of these approaches. We don't technically use like an average, but we kind of look at each of them and say what is the bigger indicator of what would represent your company's value. And again, it depends on the type of industry, the type of business it might be. But really all three of these approaches should kind of come in line together and be pretty similar. And what we do when we look at this is we typically use like the last 5 years of financials. So again, that's where we kind of start, and we look at how your business is trending. So are the sales going up? We talk about business cycles. Some of you might know there's the ups and downs. There's something called COVID-19 or a pandemic that happened in the past 5 years. So that kind of throws a wrinkle into some of the valuation stuff. So looking at that, some of those numbers, those rule of thumbs might not be a great representation. And that's where evaluation analysis kind of helps is, okay, we have these 5 years, 1.5 of those years might be kind of skewed due to COVID. So what we've been kind of looking back is even a couple of years further and kind of seeing, all right, how is that business cycle kind of looking? Because there was a big influx, a big bump in sales, and now things have maybe kind of started to settle down a little bit.
So one of the things I see all the time from business owners who are trying to exit their businesses in the year they want to exit or the year before, they make all these changes because they want to make the financial statement look a certain way, but they have to understand that in evaluation they're going to go back 5 years and they're going to look at 5 years. So some of those things that people might do, it's going to be taken into consideration, but evaluation is not going to solely be based on 1 year and anything that somebody did in that 1 year. And so that's why sometimes when we talk about a succession plan or an exit plan, I always tell people 5 years. You always want to look at a 5-year plan. And how do I get to where I want to be starting today, 5 years from now? Yes, there are those situations where companies might knock on your door and say, hey, I'm going to give you this for your company. How do you know that's a good value? That's where I said that valuation sometimes is a good idea, because you don't know if what they're offering you is a good deal or not. And when you're gifting stock or it's an internal purchase, most of the time you're going to need to have a valuation done. But again, understand that they're going to look at more than just that 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely. Go to the next slide. And so we kind of touched on this earlier, so they're normalizing adjustments. So again, this sort of valuation is really nice where, you might look at somebody's financials and say like, okay, we can compare apples to apples, but really during these normalizing adjustments, we kind of make those apples to oranges look apples to apples. So, so we look at the revenue growth. We look at, compensation. So some of these businesses, the owners, they either aren't taking a wage or aren't taking a reasonable wage based off of, the amount of time and effort they put into the business. An owner might be like, I'm just trying to keep, the money into the business. I'm not taking a big wage. So they might have a $60,000 salary when really their value is a $100,000 salary. And that would be a normalizing adjustment that we would make. So your bottom line might look really good, but hey, your salary should be this, so really, your income could be down. And it could go the other way as well. Some one-time expenses, so some repairs. Let's say in 2021 you had a big pipe break, you had a lot of repairs. You kind of want to back out those expenses because that's not typically like what your business would be. It's kind of a one-off expense. Maybe you had a lawsuit or something like that. You had higher legal fees. Those are some things that we would take out, and that would help increase the value because your bottom line would go up. And then rent. A lot of times, self-rentals, people own the business, and they also have the building, and they self-rent. Have you looked at your rent expense? Is it market rent? As you can see, the housing and the rent has gone up quite a bit in the last few years. So that's an adjustment that we would want to look based off of square footage. What are the comparables to other businesses that they're paying rent? We want to make sure that that's being adjusted.
And it's always good to, even if you own the building and the business, to have a lease in place with yourself. Because if you do sell the business, sometimes those operating leases, if you intend on keeping the real estate but selling the business, you want to have a lease in place so they can't move the day after you sell your business.
Yeah, exactly. You can go to the next slide.
Oh, and some of these other one-time adjustments, things like PPP, employee retention credit, anything like that that's going to inflate, that is not a normal item, those are going to get adjusted for.
So that's like valuation and kind of a higher level. So what's the next thing you can do? Like I said, evaluation is a great exercise. So some of these things that come up during the evaluation process, there's a lot of talking with management. There's a lot of talking with the owners. And some of these things might bring up some topics. Hey, have you increased your sales in the last, 2-3 years? Because, inventory prices have gone up. Have you kept up with that? So a lot of these things we end up discovering during the valuation process. So just trying to get to a number and seeing what my business is worth might actually bring up some other areas that you can kind of skew or help to make that. And then add key financial indicators. Like I said, one business isn't the same as the other based off the industry. So what are some of those indicators that Nancy might kind of bring up later as well that we can focus on to help increase the value? Because focusing on your sales going up might not help you with one industry compared to the other. And then again, understanding what you need. So what should we do going forward? We have a number. How can we kind of proceed and increase the value?
So I think everyone can see why having a valuation prepared is a good idea. Maybe even if you're not selling now, you're maybe looking at selling, you're gifting, you're transitioning, whatever the case is, it's good to have that starting point so that you can start to know where do I need to start to make some improvements. So, step 2, now you have a valuation, and one of the things that I always tell people when they're leaving their business, however they're leaving it, do you know what you need to get from that business? Do you have a retirement plan in place? Have you met with a financial advisor? Annex is here. You need to meet with somebody in Annex. Find out, what do I need in retirement? A lot of times they'll put a plan in place and they'll put a placeholder in for the business value. Once you know what that business value is, now you want to compare that to your valuation, and then there's something we call an asset gap. What is the gap between what I need to retire and what my valuation is? Once you understand what that asset gap is, now you have to work on how do I tighten that gap? Because the options are I either don't sell, I keep this as long as I can, which for some people might be an option if that asset gap is too big, but you do have some options. So what I'm going to talk about is how do we increase that gap. So we use a program called the Value Building Program. It's eight areas that I look at with companies to see where there's risk in their company. A valuation will indicate some of these. So if you have a valuation done, you're going to see as I go through these how some of these things are going to come up in that valuation, and then we're going to talk about what do I need to do to fix that. So these are the 8 drivers, and I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because I could spend a whole probably 6 hours talking about these in depth. But the first one is the financial. That is the valuation. That's understanding, getting clean balance sheets, clean income statements. You know, we get a lot of people come to us in the accounting industry that say, here's my financial statements, can you prepare a tax return? And we look at them and we go, whoa, there's like debit balances and liability accounts, and there's like numbers that just don't make sense. The first thing you want to do is get good, accurate numbers in place. Understand your numbers, understand your margins, understand what the industry is doing, the metrics that Kyle talked about. That's the first step. To me, I kind of equate that to if you're buying a house, you may drive by a house and the house looks beautiful on the inside. You call the realtor and you go, yes, I want to go see it. And you get there and you open the front door and it's got orange shag carpeting and harness gold appliances, and you go, oh my God, that's not what I thought I saw. That's what's going to happen with your financials. And so you want to make sure that you understand and that the numbers are buttoned down. They might not look the way you want them to look as far as profitability, but you can work on that. You just have to make sure you have accuracy. The second thing is capacity. You want to make sure in whatever business you have that there's capacity. People don't want to buy a business. A value of a business is not going to be high if you are at capacity. You can't grow. Think about if you were an investor, you're going to look at a company that you know that you can take to the next level. So you want to make sure that somehow you build that capacity. And some of the ways are you want to look at revenue expansion. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that. I think, John, we call it like a farming analysis or something.
Yeah.
But there's multiple ways that you can increase revenue. You know, sell the same thing to more people, sell different things to the same people, sell different things to different people. You want to figure out how can you have some revenue expansion within your industry. And then you want to look at earnings predictability. So you want to be able to look at that and know that this is where I'm going in the future. You want forecasts. I cringe a little bit when I ask a client, what do you think you're going to do next year? And I know the bankers do too. And they go, oh, I have no idea, it's a crapshoot. I mean, you want to be able to have some predictability into your revenue. Number 3 is independence. Independence is, if anybody's ever had an audit, you've heard something called customer concentration. You don't want to have all of your revenue in one customer. Well, guess what? It's the same thing with vendors and it's the same thing with employees. Obviously, the reason why it's called a Switzerland structure is because Switzerland has remained independent over all the years and has never been in a major war. So that's the independence. You want to look at vendors, customers, and employees. And the reason why vendors is so important is actually, I think COVID taught a lot of people. If a lot of people were using one supplier for everything and all of a sudden that supplier shut down, they didn't have a way to get materials. Now, this is a balance because I tend to work with a lot of contractors and home builders, and they get discounts and they get rebates for buying a lot of materials from the same person. You want to balance that with having somebody else on the sideline. There's a reason why sports teams have a bench and they keep people on the bench. They might not play very often, but you better believe if somebody gets hurt, they can grab somebody off their bench and pull them in. So I highly recommend that if you have a supplier that you kind of have them in the background, use them occasionally, keep them engaged. So when you need them, they're there. And the same thing with employees. You always want to have cross-training. You don't want to ever be in a situation where you lose a key employee and your company shuts down. Part of that is documentation of what everybody does. This is also, here's my commercial. This is also what we do at SVA. We do something called the process and procedure analysis. We go into people's accounting departments. We document all the processes, actually not just their accounting, but from the minute, if you're a manufacturer, the minute an order comes in till the time something ships. Document that and come up with ideas and efficiencies that people can do. You want to have that done. The other thing is working capital. This is really balancing your cash. So people tend to think that if they pay their payables off really quick, that's a great thing. It's really not such a great thing if you're not collecting your receivables quicker. You want to be able to manage your cash. The idea is you want to collect your cash quicker than you pay it. So you may think it's a great thing to pay everything within 10 days. It's really not when you look at working capital unless you're collecting within 10 days. So you want to be able to figure out ways to manage your cash. And I want to give you another example. I have a client that is very inventory intensive. And they have the ability at the end of the year to buy millions and millions of dollars of inventory at a discounted rate. And the cost of that inventory goes up. In that case, it makes complete sense for that particular client to draw on their line of credit to buy their inventory because they can turn their inventory in 30 days. If they're going to turn that inventory in 30 days, it makes more sense to borrow it, and then they get this discounted rate, they're going to turn it, and they're kind of playing that teeter-totter of working capital. So if you were to sell your business, the last thing a buyer wants to do is come in and know that they have to inject cash into the business, which is called working capital. It's your assets minus your liabilities. You want that number to be positive because not only is a buyer going to have to pay for your business, but now they're going to have to walk in the door and have cash flow. And if you have poor cash flow, that's going to be a problem. And the bank's not going to like that. When they're lending, they're going to look at that capital and that cash flow. Repeat sales. So repeat sales is all about reoccurring revenue. And I realize that not every business can do this, but I do challenge because I think there are a lot of businesses that can figure out a way to create reoccurring revenue. And I'm going to give you an example that I learned when I was going through the value building. There was a florist in New York, and there were hundreds of florists in New York. And this florist bought this business, and he thought, how can I find a way to get some reoccurring revenue? So what they did is they hit the pavement, and they went to all the businesses, and they talked to the receptionist, and they said, how many people come in here? Like, they looked at the area. And then they went to the business owners and they said, I have a plan for you. For X amount of money a month, we're going to come in every Monday morning and we're going to provide a beautiful flower arrangement at the entryway in your reception desk. They said, wow, that's great. And it was a little bit discounted because it was a long-term contract, but guess what it did? It gave them that instant recurring revenue. Now they knew they didn't have to go sell that. That was going to be an automatic every Monday morning. So even something as silly as a florist, where you would think they can't have recurring revenue, I think everybody can challenge themselves to find something. I think there's something there. And then this one is my favorite, control. So this is all about what kind of control do you have over your business and how can you differentiate your business. And what this is about is looking really hard at your business and saying, what is special about what I do? And maybe not trying to compete with everybody else that's in that market, but figuring out a way to differentiate yourself in that market. What do you have that's different? And I can tell you at SVA, one of the things that we try to focus on is what the customer needs are. and we look at them and we say, well, what does our client need and how can we help service that? It might not necessarily be our expertise, but I can tell you I have a lot of referrals that I may say, I don't have the answer, but I'm going to have somebody call you in an hour with the answer. So you have to look at what makes your business special. And I have another story. Do we have time? Oh yeah. So I have another story about years ago when laptops first came out. And there was like the Dell laptop, there was the Apple came out, and then there was, I don't even remember, Philips. They were, Panasonic actually. Anyway, they were trying to make a laptop, and their laptop was like this thick, and everybody else's were coming out thinner and thinner. And they could not figure out a way to get their laptop thinner, but their laptops were really rugged. So back then what they did is they said, wait a minute, why are we trying to compete when everybody else has this market? Let's figure out a way to capitalize on the fact that ours are thicker and more rugged. So they started to market, it was called the rugged laptop. And all of a sudden, salespeople who were traveling, because they were having to take them out of their cases all the time, started buying them. And it became the computer that was installed in every police car in the country, because police cars had a lot of movement going on in them, and these were rugged, thick laptops. So all of a sudden they took what they saw as a challenge and they made it an opportunity. So that's what I talk about differentiation and proprietary products. If you have something proprietary, market it. And then 7 is loyalty. Actually, one of the speakers talked about this earlier, the Net Promoter Score. So you want to make sure that you want to know what your customers are saying and thinking. I think that's really important, because you might think you're doing a really good job, but what kind of reviews are out there? I recommend once a year sending out a Net Promoter Score. It's very simple. One question: how likely would you be to refer my product or services to family or friends? You score from 1 to 10. One question. You will get a lot more results if you have one question than if you have 10. People don't like surveys, but they do them all the time, and I can tell you, I get these all the time and I answer them immediately, because it doesn't take long for me to just hit one button and move on. That gathers important information. Sometimes what we do is we will say, why, but optional. Because I've come to find out that if people score negative, they want to tell you why. If people give you a 1, they want to tell you why they don't like you. They don't necessarily need to go on about how good you are if they give you a 10, but they want to tell you what they don't like about you. So if you just say optional and let people fill that out, you'll start to get some feedback into why people gave it a 1. And then I think you need to gather those results. She talked a little bit about you have your promoters, passives, and detractors. You want to get to have all promoters, because those are the people that are going to be out there referring you. The passives, they like you, you didn't do anything bad. But if somebody comes along with a cheaper product, they're going to go, okay, I'm going to move on. Not that they didn't like your product. They're just going to be easily swayed. And then the detractors are going to be the ones that there was some bad experience they had. So it's really important to understand that. And then do it once a year so you can keep up with it. And then management depth. So this is probably one of the most important ones, is what kind of a management team do you have in place? Because people think that when they can't go on vacation and I can't do this, I'm working all the time, that makes them really important, and that's good. It's a killer for a company. That really, really decreases the value of a company, because that means the entire company is based on that one individual, that owner. You want to find a way to remove that and have a really good leadership and management team in place that you can, I always tell people that you can go away for a month. You want to, as an owner, And even somebody think about if you're getting ready to exit your business. Is your business gonna fall apart if you're gone? Who wants to buy a company that's gonna fall apart when you're gone? Especially right now in the M&A world, we're seeing a lot of people buying businesses that they've never been in the industry. They just wanna buy a small manufacturer, or they wanna buy some company that they don't know anything about. And if you as a business owner knows everything about the company, that's not going to be a good fit, because they're going to lose all that business the day you walk out the door. So you want to make sure that you have people in place that the business can run smoothly without you. That is probably the most important thing. You know, I went through a succession plan with a client probably 7 years ago. And the first thing he said to me at our first meeting is, I want to go to Mexico for a month. He's got a condo in Cabos. Said, I haven't been there in 5 years. I want to go there for a month and I don't want to be bothered about work. So we said, okay, that's our goal. And we put things in place. We put managers in place. We created compensation plans around it, bonus structures. And then fast forward, he's rarely there now. He's in Mexico more than I think he's here, because now he's got a really big team around him who can manage that business. So I think these are a highlight of some of the things that I want to go through. We use this value builder. They have a test to assess where there's weaknesses in your organization. What I typically do is have people fill out this questionnaire, and then it'll give you a rating, a score. I can tell you that companies I think there's been thousands of companies that they've researched through transactions, and companies that score 80% or higher sell for significantly more than those of their peers. Now, scoring 80% on this is not an easy task, but it's a really good thing to shoot for. Some of the companies like Apple they were like in the 80s, but it's very tough. But I think if you're at 60 something and you can see where you have weaknesses in your organization, you can start to now work on those weaknesses. So going back to Kyle's valuation, if they did an income approach and it was based on a multiple of 5 and it was $1 million company, maybe you can't get the EBITDA over $1 million, but can you get your multiple from 5 to a 7? Because you have all these other things in place. That just gains you now, $2 million more on your EBITDA because of the multiple. So I think it's important to figure out where you're at, figure out where you want to be, and then figure out how do you get there. So if anybody wants to take the test, if you email me, I can shoot you a link to it and then give you a score. No charge for that. And then if you anybody wanted to meet and go at it, in depth, we can do that. So that's what we have, and I think you can download. So I'll leave this up. But any questions?
It's kind of a micro question, but how do you define industry when you're doing industry comparison? Is industry defined as the classification code there in the SIC code or something like that, or is it broader than that?
So we have access to a lot of different resources, and sometimes you can drill down on those codes. And the other thing that we'll do too is we'll also look at area. So like we have a system we use called RMA, where we can actually look at recent sales based on the industry code, and then based on the location, based on the size.
Yep.
So we can drill down deeper than just the basic industry.
Yeah, or you find similar companies too. Like I said, it might not be exactly what your company is, but it might be a company that's a little bit like your company. So yeah, that's what we try to do.
Where I think the challenge comes in is there are occasionally companies we come across that may do 3 or 4 different things that are totally different.
Yeah.
And it can be a positive or a negative. It can be a little bit harder because you have to you have to make sure that financials are all broken out by segment. The advantage is you have the ability to sell just one segment, but it's hard, it becomes a little bit harder to value it as a whole because you have all these different segments. But it can be done, and like I said, the advantage is people can then sell those segments and not the whole company.
Yeah, just think about, I have a client that's kind of in a unique field, and that's why I wonder, there's not like a lot of people that do what they do, and so that's why I'm trying to understand how you define industry.
Yeah, sometimes you can look at what they do, and then like Kyle said, it might be a company that seems like on the surface it's not even close, but then when you start to look at actual processes, it may actually be closer, and you can use those as a rule of thumb.
Okay, great, thanks.
Multiples have stayed pretty high. Do you see that changing anytime soon, or I mean, it appears it's going to kind of stay that way. And then how do you figure out where that multiple should be when you're doing the evaluation?
Yeah, I guess it's always like it depends. You see like the interest rates definitely like slow down a lot of the buying. I guess it really depends on who the buyer is too. You know, there are a lot of strategic buyers out there where you're going to get a higher multiple. It also depends on the industry where, you know, manufacturing, there's assets and there's, you know, the actual like operations of the company. Those typically get a higher multiple. But yeah, I think we saw higher ones for a while because the interest rates are so low and they're able to get the financing behind it. Now that they were creeping up a little bit, we saw a little bit of a slowdown and kind of brought the multiple down a little bit. But
private equity companies had
Yeah.
a lot of money for a while.
yeah.
And so that's where we were seeing really high multiples with the private equity companies.
Yeah, and that's where those strategic buyers come in, where, you know, if you have a company that, you know, the private equity, they're like, hey, if we purchase this, it can really, you know, increase our sales, or there's a lot of synergies in there, you're going to get a higher value based off of that. So.
You mentioned for the income approach, you look at 5 years. Do you weight, you know, the most recent years at a recency bias? You know,
Yeah.
I kind of focus when I look at the most recent.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it depends. We currently like to see like, yeah, the past 2 years are kind of a better indicator of, you know, where the company is and where it's going. Valuations is always forward looking, so we always like to see like projections. So if we're doing a valuation for like we're doing some for like 2022, obviously 2023 is already like done. So it's like, how is your revenue looking in 2023? Where do you see your revenue looking in 2024? We can kind of project that out. Like I said, COVID kind of skewed a lot of that. So there's times where we're like, we're not even going to put any weight on that because there's a significant decrease in sales, or you know, the inventory was so expensive that our margins really dipped because we weren't keeping up with the pricing and stuff like that.
Or
So
people kept too much inventory because
Yeah.
they didn't think they could
Yeah.
get it, so they bulked up and had, you know, excess inventory. Yeah.
yeah, so that's where I think the importance of, again, maybe like looking at it now and seeing where you can kind of grow it and see like, hey, where's the trend of the, like I said, the business cycle? Do you see a lot of this, or do you see more of an increase? And that's where we kind of like to weight them, and it's talking with management too, like, hey, was 2022 a good indicator of where you think the business was or is going? And then that's where we might weight it a little bit more,
But
or a little bit less.
And I think the point maybe I was trying to make is it may be a red flag if you see a business like this, and then all of a sudden the year they sell, it's like
Yeah.
this. And then all of a sudden their projections start to maybe
Yeah.
go down a little bit because they're trying to make that 1 year look really good.
Mhm. And that's where starting early helps. Again, like if you're gonna sell next year, I mean, kind of already behind the 8 ball on things. So, like starting now, hopefully to sell in 5, maybe 10 years, or slowly transition that. Maybe you're still involved with the company. That also goes into account in our valuation. We kind of look at that. Like Nancy said, the management team that's in place. Can you bring somebody in? Is there somebody within your business that, hey, this would be a great person to, you know, pass it down to, or maybe they're interested in? That would certainly help the value of your company once the due diligence process is happening. That certainly helps. So.
And there's a lot of things companies can do, like, I don't know if any of you have heard stay-on bonuses. If you do have key management in place and you're selling a company, you can write in the contract that there's a stay-on bonus for that individual to incentivize them to stay. So there's a lot of, people can get very creative in transactions. But again, start with the value.
Yeah, right.
In every industry, there's been enormous consolidation. Do you view, let's say, a national or a regional group is wanting to come into Wisconsin to have a footprint in Wisconsin? Do you view those transactions differently than, say, a private individual buying another business, as you mentioned before? There's just been. Do you view the big, I'll call them institutional buyers? Do you view those transactions differently, or value them differently? Value that business differently?
So I'm going to talk more on the seller side because I've had probably 4 transactions in the past year of sellers doing that. And I would caution to not have a big earnout and don't do seller financing, because in the 3 situations that I've been involved in, the national company has not done as well as they originally predicted they would do coming into this market in Wisconsin, and it's been difficult for them to gain some traction. I've actually had a situation where my client is offering to buy it back from them because he knows he can come in and turn it around in 6 to 9 months back to where he had it, and they're struggling as a national organization in Wisconsin. So I don't know if that has any impact. Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the whole valuation process is it's between a willing buyer and a willing seller. So the value we come up with is, kind of, I wouldn't say like an average, but your average sale, typical sale. I would say once you have that value, don't go out saying, hey, this is what my business is worth, because during the due diligence process, the numbers tends to start going like this. But that's kind of the starting point of like, is this the value, like Nancy was saying, is this in your retirement strategy? Is this number okay with you? How can we build that to where we want it to go? And then we'll start here, because they're going to start bringing it down during the due diligence process. But yeah, like I said, the big companies coming in, buying it, it's usually going to be at a premium compared to Joe Schmo off the street coming in and wanting to buy your business.
But the terms might be different.
Yeah,
and
right, exactly.
That's where it can get tricky to make sure that you get that value, but you also get terms that make sense for the seller.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
I just have a closing thought. I'm John. I work with both Nancy and Kyle. We try to make these sessions pretty high level, so there's a lot of information to try to provide, but everybody's situation is different. Your timelines are different, your goals are different. So the thought would be if any of you would want to have more of a detailed one-on-one type of discussion, more catered to your specific business, we'd be happy to do that. We don't charge for those discussions. It's just a chance to get to know you a little bit. Only thing is, I don't think we did a sign-up sheet in here.
Yeah, I did. It's
You
up
did?
here.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
There were a lot of people that came in the mail house, so I don't know if everybody's on it.
Yeah, for anybody that came after the fact, if you want to have a conversation with us, just pass your business card to myself, Nancy, or Kyle, and then we'll have a way to follow up with you then. So appreciate you all coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.